Hello everyone, my name is Maciej Nowak and welcome to Osom to Know podcast where we discuss all things WordPress. My today's guest is Noel Tock, partner at HumanMade. Noel codes since a teenager, successfully launched his own products and take care of growth at HumanMade for a decade now. In this episode we talk a lot about cycles, hype cycles, product cycles and product development from an agency perspective. We also discuss working remotely, building stuff for enterprise and what to expect from the future. If you don't want to miss new episodes and keep learning more about WordPress, subscribe to Osom to Know newsletter at osomstudio.com/newsletter. That is osomstudio.com/newsletter. If you watch this on YouTube, give us a thumb and subscribe to the channel. This means a world to us. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Noel Tock.
Hey everyone, it's good to have you here. We're glad you decided to tune in for this episode of the Osom to Know podcast.
Hi Noel, how are you?
Yeah, good, Maciej. Thanks very much.
Thank you for joining the podcast. I really appreciate this.
You're more than welcome. I think you've got something cool going on. I've seen some of the previous episodes, so having some nice guest diversity across the board. It seems like it's working out well for you. So yeah, congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. This is very kind. This started recently. I have recorded a couple of episodes, but those are very kind words. So I really appreciate them. So tell me a little bit for our guests as well. About yourself. I see you have very nice. When we were talking last time. The skyline was very nice. The weather was great. I'm sitting, in my proper winter sweater because there is a blizzard outside. So 20 centimeters of snow. But how is it going for you?
Yeah, no, it's good. I spend a lot of winter time either in South Africa or Southeast Asia. And that helps a lot with all the medical issues I have, like hips and cold hands and cold feet and all that kind of stuff. So, it's perfect. I'm happy at 37.
Oh, 37 right now?
Not 37 years old, but 37 degrees. I wish I was 37.
Yeah, exactly. This was why I was referring to the temperature. Yeah. That's great. But after a couple of months, it can get tiring. No.
No, I'm used to it.
That's great. Yeah, you adapted.
Always.
Yeah. All right. So, so from, let's say, a little bit of a professional background, we are a partner at HumanMade. Can you introduce yourself from this perspective for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're three partners at HumanMade, Tom, Joe, and myself. The business started over a decade ago. We joined forces by wanting to. Tom and Joe had an agency back then. I had Happy Tables, which was like selling themes for restaurants, and that was pretty cool. And at some point, we just decided to put everything together because we turned Happy Tables, the theme business, into a SaaS, kind of like Squarespace for restaurants. But before Squarespace was really something to kind of compete with, so maybe we're a bit early on that side of things. But that's where we came together, and essentially since then we've been a WordPress company. I'd say we predominantly do agency stuff at the enterprise level. We've built a lot of products over the years, be it Happy Tables, be it WP Remote, which we were managing like 150,000 sites on at some point. We had a few plugins, and now we obviously have Altus in terms of driving cloud plus digital experiences. My role in the whole thing is Chief Growth Officer, but really ultimately what it comes down to is I enjoy building cool things with cool people, and wherever that kicks off, I have a great time. And at HumanMade, that is the growth of the business. That is what we productize. That is, where we try to innovate and, bring WordPress into the future, if you will.
Yeah, that's super interesting because, from my perspective, it's like you had a business, a product, Happy Tables. It was a product and that was growing, and then you merged, joined forces with the agency. So can you tell me a little bit, how did it happen? Have you known each other? Have you been working together closely? Or is it sealed, top secret?
No. Everything's open. Everything's open.
Okay.
No. I met Tom and Joe randomly on a client call, and the client was very nice. And it was gonna be my first sort of exposure to what the client does, what their ambitions are. So there's a bit of like a pitch deck and everything. And they had already been working with that client for a certain amount of time, and being like having no employees, just being the two of them. And by the end of the pitch from the client, I was like, this is a bit too ambitious. I don't think it's not a project for me in terms of, what the expectations were from the client, how it's going to unfold. And so I called up the two guys after, and I was like, hey, Tom and Joe, really cool meeting you, but I don't think I'm going to be working on this project, but we should stay in touch. And I think like a couple weeks later, I decided to fly out to Manchester, on like a 25 euro EasyJet flight or whatever, and flew out, met the guys out in Manchester. They had never met any of their clients, anybody from WordPress before. They hardly ever went to the big city. Let's call Manchester the big city. And it was really funny to me because they already had clients like PayPal, Sony doing microsites, and then the Chicago Tribune with a large multi-site. So they already had like a couple things going on then. And, I met up with them and I was like, hey guys, look, I'm selling this. I have this theme business. I have these themes, whatever, but I'm talking directly to, restaurant owners who want a food menu thing. They want to be able to put up events. And, this was when custom post types came out, and that was like the big attraction for me to WordPress. And I loved leveraging custom post types to create these different content types and make WordPress feel like it was completely something else. And yeah, I pitched them on that. I was like, hey, let's take this and turn it into a SaaS business, right? Where someone goes on a website and they sign up, and then there's like the builder there, right? And at the beginning, it was very much like a WordPress interface, but then we had like multiple revisions that were just, we used Knockout.js at some point. And years later, you're from Poland. I came to speak in Warsaw, WordCamp Poland 2014. And I think, my talk title was WordPress, but I redacted all the letters in between because to me, WordPress was not going to be the big consumer brand anymore. It was going to be this thing kind of pushed underneath. And, that's what I was pitching essentially then, that, people were going to build other things on top of WordPress and then the brand kind of falls away. And in some ways that has happened, but, in different ways that we expect. But at the time, at least, like that's what we did. We made WordPress invisible in the SaaS context, but that's how we met. At some point we just, we kept working together. I was involved on the agency side too, just helping with sales, helping consult, whatever it is. You just kind of mix everything together at some point, right? Like you're all passionate about the same thing. You're passionate about open source. You're passionate about the WordPress project. There's a lot of momentum, right? I could have fallen into like the Joomla project or the Drupal project and probably been as passionate about it all, but I would have had like a different level of success or a different path of success than, maybe like the what we had instead with WordPress and this kind of whole honeymoon phase, if you will, of, WordPress growing to being like an absolute, I don't know, monster in terms of the market size and the size of the plugin ecosystem. So that was a very long answer to your question.
Yeah, but very nice answer. I appreciate this, and this is also, there's that component of betting on the right horse. With WordPress, there was something that drew your attention, and you bet at this technology. And when I'm listening to this, I wasn't aware of the of the story, and this is even more interesting for me because it's like I was thinking about Human Made as the agency for like big platforms. And the original story is, okay, there were big clients at the beginning, but immediately after this, there was a product to scale. So this is very interesting, that product component, because there's Altus right now, and I want to unpack all of those boxes, and but I'm thinking about this in a way that I have a lot of friends who have agencies, software agencies, not only WordPress, but Ruby, Python, and so on. Everyone wants to launch its own product, and this is like, I wonder, is it like, is the grass greener on the other side? We tried to do this as well with one of with a PIM product, PMI product. But is it like grass is always greener on the other side? Because I have also a friend of mine has a product business. They have mobile application, very known product application in their category, and they are now starting development business because they build a great application, and they are asked by their friends, okay, can you help us with this? So the majority of companies start doing product, but there are a couple of companies that are also starting to do services work. So this is like a little bit counterintuitive, but my point is, like, everyone is trying to see what's on the other side of the of that path between services and products.
Yeah.
So
I agree. People dance between the two. I'd say there's a lot of similarities between the two. When the grass was greener, both on the agency side and the product side, when WordPress was just in its growth phase, right? If you're well positioned as an agency in 2011, 2012, we were one of the first WordPress VIP partners, and also we were quite large, and then we're based out of EMEA, and you have 10up that's like based in the US. There weren't many of us in Europe. There's just enough business for all of us. So I'd say, both the agency side and the product side has become a lot more mature. So the product side has become more productized, and there's more product tactics, and there's more iteration, and there's more critical sort of thought and approach in terms of how you build things. And then the same is true on the agency side, right? Like, you can't just build just a random website for a customer that doesn't have outcomes. Like, those websites are products in themselves. So you, as a consultant or someone that's spending clients' money, has to also be part of that outcome. You can't just say, hey, look, we're just coders. You asked us to build this. You take a certain, assuming that the client is receptive to that kind of approach, but you take part in the product that they are building. So I think it's, we are becoming multidisciplinary in terms of how we have to think about these things, because 10, 20 years ago, building a website was the outcome. That was a binary thing. We have a website, it's on or it's off. That's it. And nowadays, yes, the website's on, but like, how much money is it generating? What's the attribution model? Are you, is it the first click? Is it the last click? Like, who's responsible for the engagement, the revenue? It's much more challenging. And in a world like this, it's, sometimes less about WordPress and much more about this overall outcome that is being generated. And that happens to be just a bit further away from WordPress than we're used to. So,
but was it ever around about WordPress? Because my feeling is maybe, because we were later. I mean, we started 2011, but with different business. So we were building mobile applications. So we were like, the history is we were in top 10 results for mobile applications
Nice.
in Poland. But guess what? We are building WordPress websites, and so this changed. But my take is, was it ever about WordPress, or WordPress was always a tool that was allowing you to build stuff quickly? Because I think
it was about WordPress.
Okay.
At some point, I think there was like that phase where everything that was WordPress was cool. And I don't want to say like it was like a very long phase or whatever, but I think there was like this this nice kind of growth phase around 2012, 13, 14, where you could kind of build anything and it would sell, I'd say. Like I don't want to make it sound that crazy, but like it, like I think clients were coming to you also for like, hey, we've heard about this cool thing, WordPress. We want to build on WordPress, and like that's just the outcome they want, because it's the platform, it's the tool, and they weren't necessarily building towards something else. And the bundle was easier back then because you would build a website, you throw on some SEO, you maybe have some custom forms and things like that. But then beyond like a few tracking codes and all that, it wasn't there. Maybe someone was hooking into their CRM, like if you're lucky, or they're just like using Gravity Forms to send an email into the CRM. Like who knows? Like a bit more of a shortcut. But yeah, I'd say there was probably a small time frame. Like WordPress is coming up to 20 years next year, so it was definitely a minority of its time, in which I think WordPress was the hype, and like it was just the grass was always greener kind of scenario.
All right. And do you have this feeling right now, for example, about Webflow, where people wanting to build a website on Webflow want to do this 50% because it's Webflow, new shiny thing, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always around, right? Like it's, be it like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or GPT-3 or Figma, like disrupting Sketch, let's say. You can look at like rank math, I think, on like the WordPress side that has what is it called? What's the SEO plugin called on
Yoast?
Is it called rank math? No, the other one. It's called
rank math, I think.
Is it called rank? Yeah, rank math. So you have something like rank math that has like grown like very aggressively compared to Yoast, and maybe some of that is marketing or product marketing, where some people have just switched from Yoast to rank math because why not? Like let's try it out. So I think there's always a hype factor with things, and Gartner calls it like the hype cycle for a reason. People dive into it, being more impressed by its potential than the actual execution, and then that's where you then have that what's the next phase after the hype cycle called? It's like it's where you come to realize, oh no, this is way harder than when you thought, and that's like the whole bucket of personalization.
All right, I have this graph, this picture from the book Crossing the Chasm, and there's a chasm with new product. Okay, you jump this, and then you are on the top of the wave, and then this is the best moment to start building something new, as long as you are on top of the wave, until it's starting to phase out or get slower.
Yeah. So the question is, do you ride the wave to the end and then paddle all the way back out, or do you say, hey, I've had a good wave so far, I'm gonna stop here and then go back to the lineup? Like, what's the decision model look like there?
I hear proper surfing wording from you.
No.
No, all right.
I enjoy being in water. It doesn't mean I'm good.
All right. Okay.
My friends are way better than me.
Oh, so you do surf a little, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I seen through you. All right. Yeah, but on the other note, we talked a little bit about those phases and cycles, and I cannot ask you about your point of what's your point of view about where we are right now, because we are recording this in the middle of December 2022, in the midst of economic downturn, recession, tech companies laying off people. And if I understand correctly, you joined HumanMate slightly after last crisis, after 2008 and so on. So, do you see any similarities between those periods of time we are right now and what was back then?
I mean, like, without getting into like the kind of global economic situation, because I feel like the contagion of that is probably more widespread than what the housing crisis did back then. So I'm if anything, I'm more worried about like humanity, the state of humanity and where that's going, especially in a lot of countries that I'm surrounded by, in Asia, where like these things can, change quite drastically. But yeah, I like nobody's, I think the interesting thing about, times like this is everybody's an expert kind of, if you like turn on Gartner or you turn on Forrester, all the industry experts from like our space, or then you turn on like, or you read like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times,
Or open Twitter.
FT, or open Twitter. Everybody's an expert, right? And I think the only thing that's constant in times like this is absolute change, like chaos in some kind of way. So I think, if you take, I think it was Edgar Allan Poe that said it, in one of his books, believe half of believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. And I think that's especially true.
Like this.
I think it's absolutely true in times like this. Stay close to the things you enjoy building. Stay close to the market. Stay close to your clients, and trust your gut. Like I like that's what I'm doing. I think that it's great opportunity. I think companies that raised a lot of capital are being humbled by what's happening now, and they're losing valuations, and like no one person is to blame, right? But everybody kind of stacked on top of each other, and it drove these insane valuations. We all took part in it, in some way or another, be it with our vote towards the stock market and purchasing and then selling or whatever that is. We all participated to a certain degree. But yeah, I think, this is a great time where change and then some of the more stable things like open source, hopefully, are able to stay top of mind, or even have like a bit of a resurgence, as, a move towards stability. Because some of these, larger or more, venture-backed companies may experience situations where, they drastically reduce support. They don't deliver on the roadmap they're going to say, in terms of innovation, and it all kind of slows down. And then the client's like, did I make the right choice here? Should I move to something else that's a bit more stable? WordPress celebrating its 20th year next year is an incredible milestone. Many MarTech companies are nowhere close to that. So yeah, I think, it's, trust in yourself, in times like this, and what you see, and, work with your friends, work with your crew, your tribe, whatever you want to call it, and ship.
All right. Yeah. Ship. A keyword.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of shipping, can you tell us a little bit more about Altis? How it started, what is the product, and why it happened?
Yeah, good question. So we started when we left VIP. We left because we wanted to be able to provide more in terms of like the infrastructure and the hosting.
But was it a barrier?
So VIP had a few barriers at the time, and we were able to acquire new customers because they weren't able to fulfill certain features, and we were at the time, and we were also just pretty young and quite happy to do very customized setups that weren't like productized, and we just learned a lot doing that. And we have a number of clients still from that day that are hosted by us, which they're running pretty complex setups in many countries, and like that's great. But yeah, that's where it was born. I'd say we were always on the upper end of sort of bespoke, customized hosting. So almost like if you take the top tier host today, and what is like that final option of like, screw it, we're just gonna host it ourselves. I'd say we're in between that spectrum where we're very high end in that kind of customized category. So to think about it differently, we're between like the top tier host on the market in terms of like a productized host. If you're talking about like a WP Engine or a Pantheon or a VIP, and then a client saying, hey, we're just going to do this ourselves. because these other companies are really large. They have lots of processes. They've really productized it. They have a lot more boundaries, I'd say, around how they want to do things, and we're quite open to do things in a new way, or to push the boundaries and do some kind of custom setup where we're just interacting with different technologies, or being very accepting of a very different way of doing things. So we have that ability to be at that level, let's say. But when we were doing that, we started growing and acquiring more customers. And at the time, it was just called Human Made Platform, which is a bit of a weird name, right? Like a human made platform. Like on the agency side, you're like scaling humans, and on the product side, you're scaling machines. And we're like a human made machine scaling thing. Like so, it doesn't really like make sense, right? yeah, exactly. So it's maybe it's a bit dystopian or something like that. It's like the kind of company you'd see in like the movie Gattaca or Blade Runner. But no, Human Made Platform essentially was maybe not the best name, and we wanted to productize it. We were also seeing in the market how digital experience was growing, and yeah, we decided to move forward with Altus DXP at the time. Having a pretty loose, let's say, definition of DXP. DXP, defined by Gartner and Forrester, is very much like an integrated all-in-one suite or platform, provided by Adobe, provided by Liferay, provided by Sitecore, Epi, which is now Optimizely. All these kind of different companies have all-in-ones. And obviously we're not restrictive in that regard. Like, we want to integrate with different providers, different vendors. If you have a different CDP, if you're using HubSpot as a CRM, if you're using all these different mailing tools, if you're using Zapier to hack around on stuff, whatever it is, like, we're obviously very open to that. But DXP, in that sense, we try to do, I think, too much. And that comes down to me also, in terms of like where I steered the ship. But I think we try to do too much between the cloud plus the DX software. And that's why, now we have Altus Cloud as one, and Altus Accelerate as the kind of separate plugin that we're, trying to drive to market.
Mm-hmm. All right. But did it start like a piece of software that allowed you to build websites faster? Was this the beginning of Altis, or did you thought maybe we are lacking in the market a tool that does this and this? It would be cool to build it, and let's do this.
Yeah, the Human Made Platform at the time, and then Altus by extension too, we wanted it to be very much a framework. So driving a lot of modularity, and then driving a lot of extensibility. So providing a lot of foundational pieces like our analytics, be it our experience blocks, whatever those may be, and then also expose them in a kind of frameworky way, right? It's almost like saying like, hey, here's all the API endpoints. You can build whatever application you want on top. And in that model, what we're saying is, here's our platform, our framework. Comes with, everything's already running on AWS. We have it all optimized. We have the software layer that we maintain too. But you as a platform owner inside of a very large company, take that and mold it to become the thing you want. And then you essentially almost like resell it internally, right? Because you might be CTO of a very large company and then say, hey, this is large company platform, web platform. Whenever you want to use it, come to the IT department, we'll spin up a site or whatever. And then everything runs within those boundaries and the platform that they've customized out of ours. So it's not being, exposed to the Altus platform, in terms of like a branded kind of very unique user experience. And that's where we started. So if, yes, we wanted to create like, let's say, a starting point for enterprise, and really like, pretty like large enterprise, to essentially have everything they need to build their own web platform using all, the tools and everything we provide. So that high starting point is something that we provided. But, as we split out now, we're very much doing that on the cloud side. So the cloud side is, it still represents that to a certain extent, but is very much in the hosting territory now. And then on the Accelerate side, like it's very, very different because we provided a lot of these features and functionality before in that framework way, saying, hey, here's your API endpoint, here's the basic thing, mold it to your needs. And now with Accelerate, we're obviously trying to be much more of a consumer product, so we're having to make those decisions and say, this is the user experience we're going to pursue, or this one, right? Where you're trying to build features that have an end-to-end flow that is funneled and created by us, and not something that the platform owner from an enterprise company dictates and says, oh yeah, we're going to piece this together like this, and then that's the experience I'm going to give my users. But instead, with Altus Accelerate, the experience is the same for all users. So that's where we're trying to figure out what is the the best experience for A/B testing blocks, for personalizing blocks, for having global blocks, all at a SMB plus level. So going down market from enterprise into SME into SMB, and creating something that fits the WordPress narrative in terms of it's intuitive, it's easy to use, the 5-minute install, and then you're good. So that's what we're trying to pursue.
So the question is Altis built on WordPress or WordPress compatible, or a totally standalone piece of software that you integrate later with whatever website technology you are using?
Yeah, good question. Altus Cloud is obviously WordPress hosting and completely that, and Accelerate is it's SaaS backed, as in like we're running our own analytics engine, we're running a bunch of stuff on the back end, which is running on our servers. But ultimately, yeah, it's WordPress software. Like you have it inside of your WordPress admin. We're not interested right now to develop on other platforms, I'd say, because WordPress has a unique experience, especially with the evolution of the block editor, and we want to be able to bring some of these technologies that are exciting in MarTech that are occurring in other places, be it A/B testing, personalization, integrating with CDPs or whatever that may be, to WordPress itself. I think this is one of the largest challenges that WordPress has, is staying relevant to all the hype and innovation that's happening in the market. And some of that is absolutely guilty of the hype cycle. Maybe some of these companies are not delivering, but in a lot of other cases, yes, there's just exciting technologies happening, and we're still talking about WordPress, about having its potentially like its REST API, it has this and it has that, instead of saying, yes, it's headless, yes, it integrates with Next, and having all these kind of dedicated pages. You can and I'm referring to something like Sanity, where like the product marketing is really solid compared to the product marketing of WordPress. So yeah, some of it is also just helping WordPress anchor outside of its own kind of bubble or sphere, and becoming more relevant and associated with these emerging technologies.
Yeah, so this is interesting for me to ask: is Human Made more services business, or are you transitioning more into product-based company? What's the major component?
Yeah, major component is still services. That's our bread and butter. That's where we learn. I still sell services from time to time, even if it's less now. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely that. I think somewhere down the line we'll always have a bit of everything, because we're trying to bring WordPress on this journey towards like these broader outcomes that customers are looking for. And you're not going to find all your answers from one place, from a product or from your services or whatever that may be. And in that regard, you try to have a bit of a portfolio going into, yes, like this new cycle. Let's say, you used the word cycle before. I think the cycle that's coming up, like, it's exciting. I think we want to be positioned. Sure, some of it's our bread and butter in terms of the agency work. We have cloud. We're growing cloud. That's great. And then you have Accelerate, which is like let's say like the highest risk piece in a portfolio, which is also exciting. And that way we're able to participate at all the different levels while still remaining human made.
And what risk component in there? Is it losing the investment of time and energy, thought, lost opportunities, or reputation? What's at stake?
I don't think it's reputation. I'd probably strike down now pretty quickly, just because I think if you fail and you're able to make retros, or you're able to talk about it openly, and you're able to admit to those mistakes and talk about how you'll change in the future, like I think that's great. So I think anything you do, if you do it the right way, it's reputation building, even if you fail. I think that's where that is. So the risk is lost time for what you do, and then lost investment in terms of looking forward to revenue of a given product over time. And obviously with product stuff, it takes longer for that to come in. But yeah, that being said, I'd say, what was my train of thought there? You're gonna have to do a little cut there.
My question, no problem. But my question was, what's to lose? Because you mentioned that the cloud is the riskiest part of this, and I understand.
I said accelerate was.
My mistake. Accelerate.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it like the product is to lose? I mean, this is the business, reality. You invest, and sometimes you lose the investment. The product doesn't fit, and so on. So is it the product that can be lost, or is there anything else? How do you think about this? Because you were always. I'm asking about this because this is again interesting. You're a services company building your own product, learning along the way, and you did this from the very beginning since you joined you personally Human Made, but together you did this from the very start. So I would like to know how are you thinking about this risk versus, for example, people starting their own businesses around the product, like startups, doing, now it's the time where you can build stuff the easiest, the fastest ever possible, right? So much no-code tool. You take a business idea and using all of the shortcuts that there are to build something MVP. You can do this, and with emerging AI, generative stuff, this is even more possible. And I compare this to building stuff that you are building with products, and this is not so easy as with no-code tools. So this is where I'm coming from, asking you about the risk of running those two products.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like I'm very comfortable with risk, just as from a personality point of view, and maybe that's why I'm the one kind of behind some of the product stuff at Human Made, or the majority. And yeah, that's something where we're very comfortable. I think, ultimately we're very close to clients. We're very close to the product. We're very close to the WordPress ecosystem. And because of that, we have a view into these things that allow us to say, hey, we should go build Accelerate, or, we should, continue to build this feature or that feature for Altus Cloud, or, on the agency side to productize certain processes, or, to productize the top of the funnel, or to engage in different processes. So, I think the lines are blurred across the entire business, but, there absolutely is a higher risk profile for something that is not validated and something that does not have product market fit. But yeah, like the biggest risk is time and money. Then the larger risks around the entire business is that, let's say WordPress just becomes less popular, or, consulting hours become more commoditized, or, you're talking about AI before, like, do some of these services get offset? Like, who knows, does no code, low code actually become, something that actually displaces 50% of our consulting business? Who knows? Ultimately, you keep an open mind to these things, and you always try to adapt. I think, you can always look at past industries to a certain extent. So if you look at the photographer business back in the day, when everybody was shooting with film, and then all of a sudden digital came around and disrupted the entire market, and you had a lot of analog professional film photographers saying, this is horrible, they're taking away our business and everything. But then you could tell the ones which were adapting, they moved over to digital, they started using Lightroom, they started improving their processes and their workflows. And then they started working on their marketing more because there's just more competition. And they adapted to the market environment. So I think there's risk in the entire portfolio. But yeah, like this is these next couple of years are so big in terms of change that you have to keep an open mind across the entire portfolio and not just one, risk asset or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And when you're building Altus products, do you have dedicated team, or is it, because again, from what I'm observing, when the idea for the product pops out, when there are people on the bench, most of the time, let's utilize all of those people who are waiting for the next project, and then those projects never materialize because this is not the way to build the product. And if you want to build a product, this is like the wisdom is you have to set up the whole team with a manager over that team, and this is a dedicated team. And do you have similar thoughts on this?
Yeah, so cloud basically runs as its own micro business within HumanMade. I mean, not even that micro anymore, but like it's its own business, own management, own reporting lines. Keep in mind that with cloud, we're talking about enterprise. We have SLAs, we have uptime agreements. Like these are all extremely important to us. We want to be able to support our customers to the best of our abilities, and that's not just about like is the server up, is it down, but how performant is the stuff they're doing with WordPress really? Can we help out anywhere? We've deflected a 8 billion page request DDoS attack, I think it was roughly a year ago now, which is insane, and you absolutely
attack?
need...
It was a single attack,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a single attack. And, like you have to be in a position with something like cloud to be able to manage those kind of situations. Cloud is obviously like some of the riskiest stuff you can do because you're holding the person's, the company's site in your hands and running it. It's very different to, running beta software on a single desktop somewhere and playing around with it. Like that's a very different experience to, we're hosting multiple Fortune 500 brands on our ecosystem, and it just needs to be multiple fallbacks. And, you talked about reputation before, like that's where, you can take a pretty large reputational hit, or at the same time, grow your reputation like we did, with this DDoS attack, and being able to deflect that. So yeah, to answer your question, like dedicated team on cloud, and then Accelerate is much more startup-y, where like, the team range is there from 2 to 4, depending on what we're building, how we're moving and all that. But that's very much like the startup-y kind of focus. And, as you correctly point out, you're not just taking people off the bench to just come work randomly on this stuff. Like we have, the engineers working on this are dedicated product people that work on the Altus side. So, if we do have, people that have time for other things, there may be more other internal projects, which are, you could kind of consider their own projects, products, be it like our own like website, be it our handbook or whatever that may be. So there's certainly work there, for people that are working on the service side of the business. But, completely correct that the people that are working on cloud and Accelerate need to be in the flow, the state of mind, and, having an understanding of like what the vision is and where that's going, and being one with that to be able to drive that forward.
All right. Makes sense. And I wonder, those are the products you're inside WordPress WordPress ecosystem, 100%. And with WordPress, there comes community. And I wonder, what's your take with either, contributing community stuff, events, how are you looking at the community? This is for WordPress, but for other technologies, this is not so present. So, and community comes with good and bad, right? Things. So I wonder what's your take on the community?
Yeah, I mean, community is integral to what WordPress is. Like like even back in the day when I, first came out to Warsaw or whatever, like, I was just doing the rounds and going to a lot of first time WordCamps, be it Warsaw, Bratislava, be it, what was the other, Prague was one of the first ones that was the first WordCamp they had. And like, those moments are timeless, in many ways. And I'm not talking about contributing or anything. It's just like the aspect of being in it together and, sharing that same overarching kind of baseline of open source is cool. Open source is good for the web. And then having completely different interests within that, like I might be on the enterprise side, you might be on the plugin side. You might not even work in WordPress, but you just like showing up and contributing to language translations or whatever that may be. And I think that momentum is quite amazing, across WordPress as a whole, and the diversity that we have in viewpoints, diversity of where the revenue is coming from. And, like WooCommerce is a great example of something that just broke off and became its own thing. And that's very amazing. But for us as a business, like, we've definitely contributed, sometimes more and sometimes less. I'd say we're in a less phase now, and we're trying to figure out how to, come back to a point where, we're meeting Matt's, standard of 5 for the future. I think it's 5 for the future. And, being at that level where we're, contributing in such a way that we're, just having an impact on the open source project in a more sizable way. Like I think we drove through in a very big way with like the REST API, and like Joe and Ryan working on that. That was insane, I think, because back then it was like connecting 37 of the web to a potential 63% of the web, and that's a great project. But I think in some ways we also have to find what we're looking for to contribute to. We definitely have individual people in the company that would like to contribute more of their time to open source and WordPress, and I think we also want to look towards ways to making that happen. But it is a great balance between time, money, resources. It's not the easiest thing to just turn on and off.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm asking about this because when I was on WordCamp Europe this June, and there was Matt on the scene, and the questions were asked, I felt that because we are building WordPress for a couple of years now, but I have never been involved in the community. And only last year, after the countries opened their borders, you were allowed to travel again. WordCamps were started again. So I'm making up for all of those lost years, let's say. And the community aspect is new for me. And I'm like I'm a sponge now, absorbing all of this human factor, human aspect of a community inside WordPress. And I felt that there was a big, not a tension, but let's call it a tension between community, Matt, and what I'm trying to say is that it's not easy to build a product which is built by the community, itself. I'm not talking about the plugins that are commercially developed or products around WordPress, but the WordPress core, and all of those people that are committing their own time and effort. And then there's the vision of the product, and it's like with a corporation or a startup, or you have to have a clear vision for the product, which is WordPress, and then there's the community who does the majority of the work, development, maintenance, and I see a challenge here because there has to be a clear vision dictated by as little people as possible, whereas the execution is on the totally other spectrum where there is so many people committing fragments of their work, like a couple of hours here, there. But if you multiply those the effort by the number of people, it's totally different spectrum, because those are not full-time employees. There are, of course, but the community are volunteers. So I see it's a very fine balance between what should be built, what people want to build, and making it whole coherent, roadmap and development, and keeping everyone on board for this. So I see here a huge challenge which I wasn't aware of until I traveled around, joined those WordCamps.
I know what you mean. So we have Matt as a leader, and I think in this kind of the kind of ecosystem where we're in, his title is often the same as other ecosystems where you're a BDFL, the benevolent dictator for life, and that's like the role you absolutely have to play. I think Matt has done a really good job of being in that role because it is extremely difficult. But at the same time, I also recognize that the use cases of WordPress have just blown up way beyond blogging over the years, and that means that something like, WooCommerce can go off and then have like a dedicated focus. But, I think there's still a big part of WordPress. It's almost like I'd say, take everything that's still branded as WordPress and it needs to become its own brand, and it needs to be like broken down into its own piece. So enterprise is a good example of, something for us that's challenging, because like I have no problem with the product. Like sure, it has its shortcomings. We want to build these things. There's these things on a roadmap or whatever. But I think WordPress as a product is great. Like the challenge I have is at the enterprise level is that, the WordPress Foundation doesn't market it. It doesn't have a dedicated, chief marketing officer or chief growth officer or whatever that comes from like the B2B enterprise space and then says, hey, we're really going to drive this like enterprise piece, or we're really going to drive like this SMB place, this piece or whatever. And we don't have those things in place. So my challenge is less about the kind of code fragments that are coming in, and it's more about, how does attention get maintained in a time like this where, we've had an unparalleled amount of money invested in MarTech in 2022. And obviously like that's, going through a change now, and that's the opportunity we talked about before, the chaos and the change, and, maybe, room for something like WordPress to grow again. But we also need to position ourselves to be there. Now, what I won't say is that I don't think that's Matt's job to go do. I think Matt's doing like a great job with Tumblr. And he's showing that, hey, look, there's this thing called WordPress over here, and I'm going to go outside of WordPress almost and go do this very ambitious thing called Tumblr, social blogging, and change the way that those kind of social platforms run, from trying to be ad revenue driven to being subscription driven, but then also fully powered by WordPress. And now competing against Twitter and being in that whole saga, and doing the whole like two blue check marks stuff and everything. Like I think Matt is fully engulfed in that world, and he did a podcast with the editor of The Verge. I forget his name, but like that was just like a week ago or so. And Matt said this is the most humbled he's ever been, doing this kind of work before. So you can tell that like his whole attention is there. But I think that, many of us need to find our similar callings within that space. And, take enterprise WordPress, for example. None of us agencies as one agency can do it alone. But I think, if we band together and create, an alliance, like the Mac Alliance exists, we can create something that tries to take WordPress on this journey, outside of its own bubble and into that other world where other people are participating, right? Where the exciting stuff is. And that is, I think, the, like how I kind of flip that on its head. And I realize, I'm not answering the contributor fragment thing at all, but like, I think there's just lower hanging fruit or larger waves to ride that people aren't even seeing, like it's too insular in many ways, like you can talk about WordPress all day, but if you don't take this thing and put on the train tracks and actually shoot it off into this whole other direction, you're not going to, be around in 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I especially like your take on the enterprise. Obviously you are coming from this world, but this is something I also noticed, that there is enterprise is not visible. Enterprise tech is not visible on WordPress, and it might be the case that this is, there is no dedicated position to make sure WordPress is visible for enterprise customers. But maybe there is not so many of them that this needs to be done, because some of them will know about WordPress from different, points of view or positions and so on. And so maybe this is not worth the effort. But at the same time, I see this as a challenge we face as well with our clients who want to be convinced WordPress is the way to go. So they come to us, for example, and they want to be convinced they are making the right choice. And, how to do this, right? So there is not so much promise visible that the WordPress is the tool for the enterprise as well, where other companies and providing enterprise software are banging, this message like take our closed software and pay the license fees and so on, because this is made for enterprise, which I won't call names, but where you take when you take enterprise software, most of the time you can be certain this will look ugly, and this is number one. You can be sure of this will be ugly or clunky because this is enterprise. So what I'm trying to say is that I see this as well, but maybe it's not worth the effort from the perspective of the product itself, because there is not so many of the enterprise users and no one is paying any fees. So if we are going to invest this, there will be 500 companies wanting to do this. So maybe this is not worth the effort.
Yeah, so I'd say to counter that, like we use the word enterprise very loosely to mean like really, really big companies. And obviously MarTech in many ways over the last couple of years has become a lot more democratized, and a lot of companies, big or small, are using the same stuff. So like to me it's almost like SMB plus, if companies making 10 million or more, 20 million or more, like I think it already falls in this realm of, hey, we need to do a better job of product marketing and speaking about WordPress in ways that matches the language that clients or potential clients are experiencing from other vendors. So we don't say REST API, we say headless, right? Like we don't talk about plugins, we talk about integrations or whatever. Like there's a lot of like product marketing, I think, that can go a very long way. And also, be dedicated in terms of having lots of different landing pages and speak to how WordPress not only plays nice with all these different other solutions that are out there, and that people are and that companies, not only enterprise but also smaller ones, are using, and want to have the confidence that quite quickly that WordPress is able to tick a lot of those boxes when they're playing RFP, RFI, or whatever to figure out what their next platform is going to be. So I think if you take pure enterprise of WordPress, that's probably like $1 billion market. I'd say, like just kind of thinking off the top of my mind when I try to add up like agencies, hosts, and all that kind of stuff. Can't forget that companies like Accenture and Cognizant and all that are also delivering WordPress. Publicist Sapien, I'm not even sure if Publicist Sapien is, but like the other two are. And then when you go to like SMB plus or something like that market could easily be like 3 billion, 4 billion, who knows? Like it's not a small chunk. I'd say like put it this way, the SMB plus market is worthy enough of having its own product marketing that WooCommerce is, I'd say. Okay. That's how I'd look at these things. I think that's what it needs to become. Like WordPress is just too big to be everything.
Okay, but it is already everything. But it's not
I know, but but we can't sell it because you're going into client meetings and and this is what you're talking about. You're having to sell every time. You have to sell WordPress, and then you have to sell yourself. in these meetings.
Sure.
And like that's tough. Like you want to be able to go in, like an Adobe partner goes in, or like a Sitecore partner goes in because someone's already bought in and they're like, yeah, we'll get that stuff. You're just the agency that's going to deliver it, and you're done. Like that's amazing. But we need the content, and we need the reputation in the market. We need industry analysts to recognize WordPress as a whole, not just WordPress VIP or whatever, and to have respect for a larger, visible, enterprisey, or let's say SME plus ecosystem that speaks the right language. Speaks the language of B2B.
Yeah. I guess if someone would say, okay, you are selling me this as an enterprise solution, why I can have the same thing for $3.99 a month, plan somewhere else or whatever. I'm not talking about the throughput.
We've heard all that.
yeah, exactly. So how do I compare to the same software on a different plan? So yeah, that's a challenge. And actually, when you are talking about this, it's the level of difficulty rises exponentially with the bigger clients. So with the bigger execution, it's much more complex. Not linearly but exponentially to build, but also to sell the platform and yourself. So I guess maybe this is good after all that there is no wording about enterprise because this is a job of the agency to lay out the solution benefits of WordPress for this particular use case. Whereas lower in the market with smaller solutions, this is easier problem solver, smaller, simpler, and so on. So maybe this is the difficulty level that is preventing from explaining everything to everyone on the same page of WordPress solution.
I know what you're saying. I think, I'd say like how do you make that SME plus, or just like B2B? Let's just say B2B, much easier. How do you make WordPress B2B marketing that easy for businesses to understand? Because Adobe is, like taking an extremely complex piece of software, which has, to my knowledge, or my experience at least, very high back-end fees and just a lot of costs associated to getting up and running, but somehow that's being sold and marketed in a very, let's say, easy way at that C level where they're talking about DX, they're talking about personalization, they're talking about customer journey orchestration and all these things their tool can do. We should be able to take the power of WordPress, simplify it, repackage it in a way that it matches the exciting things that other companies are seeing when they interact with vendors. So a good example is WordPress has the REST API. It's capable of doing headless in multiple ways, either in a hybrid way where you're still using a part of the theme, or completely headless where you're just straight into Next, React, whatever it is, or you're just building completely other stuff. And something like Contentful, a proprietary solution, which to mine, early days, Contentful, was the same or worse to WordPress in my opinion, and did a great job at, marketing the headless thing. And to me, that means that WordPress needs its own product marketing line for B2B as opposed to just B2C.
All right. Yeah. I'm seeing this as well. With the right wording, I'm observing this from Web3 perspective, where browsing websites of projects, to my knowledge and at least my experience, most of them are on Webflow. That's why I was referring to Webflow earlier, because the marketing is hitting the right note with right people and so on, especially for Web3, where the decentralization is big piece of the narrative. Being centralized in a proprietary software is very, very, very peculiar, technology decision. Yeah, and I wanted to ask you as well, because you are working, you are a nomad basically. You work here and there wherever is hotter, and is the whole company 100% remote?
Yes. Like everybody has the ability to go completely remote. We still have an office in Matlock. We used to have an office in Australia. Where else do we? I'm not sure if we had offices elsewhere. I'm sure it's evading me, but yeah, we only have Matlock now in the UK, and just a few people drop in from time to time. But like, yeah, we're 100% remote.
And aren't you tempted to get back to the office? I know you not, but maybe you are. Not for sure, not in the UK because the temperature is not matching your profile. Your temperature profile.
It doesn't match my profile.
Yeah, but I'm asking about this because again, with the, let's say, change in the mood after the pandemics, with the remote work, organizations were forced to allow remote, where not that they wanted, but they were forced, and now we are observing, back to the office movement, or hybrid work or enforced hybrid work and so on. So people calling, fully remote environments unworkable or totally not efficient environments. What's your take? I mean, for example, we are now 100% remote. We are distributed. We changed our patterns of hiring people. We were always hybrid, but we were planning to go fully remote and distributed. Pandemics helped us make the decision faster.
Yeah,
but we are not looking back. We are downsizing the office and so on. So we are going to move it, to push it more and more with our decision. But you were there much longer. And what's your take on this?
I mean, yeah, remote working is like a massive can of worms, but ultimately, like I at this level, I think it's almost like a human right. I'd say, especially if you have family, children, other obligations, whatever that is. Like, if you have the ability, if you work in this kind of field, like I think it's just the only way forward. Because what's the point of having someone sit in traffic for 2 hours, 3 hours a day, or commute or whatever? It's a real struggle. I think as a manager to stand to that and say, yes, please come into the office, and you hear all the horror stories on, Reddit's like subreddit, anti-work or whatever, where, a lot of people are just like, yeah, my boss is like, forcing me to come back to the office. I'm just giving in my resignation. Like people have money saved up and they're ready to just go and, take a break. So like, I think it's cool that people in, at least in some economies have that choice to be able to say, hey, screw you. Like I'm not going to come back to the office and just, look for work when it's kind of convenient again, or they don't feel the pressure to have another job like lined up immediately. So, I think that's nice that there is that pushback from the people, if you will. Speaking more personally for myself, like I really enjoy being around other people physically, especially if we're in flow for something, where we're disagreeing a lot, or we're trying to come up with like ideas ourselves and trying to, like let's say build product or startup or whatever. But like what I try to do there is be on the terms of the other people, so like last year, a few of us met up in South Africa. We've met up in Thailand before. We've met up in Bulgaria before. We've met up in Germany before. I mean, I can just rattle off like plenty of countries, but ultimately, some of us just put in the effort to kind of be in the same place at the same time. And like that helps tremendously. And yeah, then we still have the benefit of being in, quite a cool place. But yeah, we have no regrets as an organization, like doing remote, like like even the question of like, let's say trusting employees to do the work or whatever that is, like that doesn't come into question. Like there's none of that kind of fear, let's say.
But there is none of this fear because you weren't burned along the way, or you have some kind of, procedures, or it's, you can catch it at the stage of the recruitment process, because you can either trust everyone or don't trust anyone. There are those kind of people where no matter what, they will not trust you because of whatever reasons. That's the personality of a given individual. So because I'm asking, because then this is also sometimes hard to make sure everyone are aligned. I'm not saying Office solves this thing, but do you have any sort of hacks, or not hacks, or more procedures to make sure everyone is efficient and working on the right thing?
I think you can come up with like a lot of procedures, processes, hacks, whatever. I think the starting point for us at Human Made was our values. And what we believe in. And one of the values we have is start with trust, but work hard to keep it. I hope I didn't butcher it. Yeah, I hope I didn't butcher like the words. But that is the essence of it. So someone comes in, they're starting to work remotely. If you haven't met them, sure, it's like some humans can be like, I don't trust that person. I haven't met them, haven't had beers with them, or something like some other kind of weird statement like that. Like we don't accept that. Like, you should start from a position of trust with new employees, but then it's also on the new employee to communicate, frequently, be it async across time zones, be it, showing up for the meetings. We're not forcing anybody to turn on their camera, but obviously having that kind of presence, replying to things in a timely manner, like all these things already are really doing a lot for you, I think, in terms of, showing that you're, a part of the organization and you're trying to, achieve the same outcomes as everyone else, and you're trying to contribute to that. So I think it's more easily noticed. If you just kind of fall by the wayside, or, don't put in the effort to try and communicate with your teammates and trying to be part of that day-to-day flow, like and then at that point, you just have the normal processes that kick in. So I don't think it's anything world-shattering, in terms of like the individual processes that we have, but I think our values and the system we have there inform a lot of how we think at a much higher level, and that's all public, right? Like I think we have the license under Creative Commons, even the handbook. So yeah.
All right, I will have a look. I'm asking this as well because again, among the layoff stuff and so on, there were a lot of companies that were, for example, forcing people to get back to the office. But for example, they were immediately delaying this because there were no office space, because they were hiring, during the pandemic, and they were 3 times as big, but the office didn't grow as much. So it's on a rotation basis. So Lego is one of the examples that grew so much during the pandemic, hired so many people that they cannot accommodate them in the office, at the same time wanting people to visit the office. So this is something interesting, since they hired so many people, they are growing. Suddenly they want everyone go back to the office, and what do you think could be the reason? Because they are stating that the efficiency levels are not there, like people are not efficient enough. The results aren't coming. So is it? I don't want you to judge a particular company, but this is not a stable trend.
I think it's just weird. Like I don't think I've seen a single one of those reports, comments, actually show any statistics,
Sure.
like, and actually come out, because we all do, like all the companies that are more than like 20, 30 people probably do like engagement surveys at this point, and are doing all these kind of other things, and probably monitoring performance to some kind of extent, like what's your profitability, or, how much are you contributing to the bottom line or whatever. Like I'm assuming like, these companies that are saying these things before the pandemic had that information and would be happy to write a report on how they did this and that, and it increased whatever thing by 12.31%. I'd love to see that report for these kind of statements. So I think the onus is on the managers or the leadership teams that are saying or making these claims that efficiency is down to show that information and then have open conversations about that, as opposed to just shooting down remote as the culprit, as the thing that's responsible for it. That I don't think is productive. So my gut feeling is it's more of a reactionary approach and just kind of making stuff up, like unless I'm proven otherwise. I think that's what it is.
All right. And changing gears a little bit. What can we expect from WordPress? What's your feeling? I'm not saying what WordPress is promising next year, right? But what would you say we should expect from this space? And this space means WordPress, but also other competitors, competing platforms. From this ecosystem of website tools, what should we expect?
Do you mean website tools or
like
and DX more broadly?
I would focus on WordPress and likes of WordPress, not broader.
Yeah, I think it was like the CEO of or the founder of Netscape, like way back in the day, said, I think all value is created by bundling or unbundling software.
You can only to earn money. You can only bundle or unbundle.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was the statement he made, and I love that, because I think there's a lot of truth to that. And with WordPress, at its beginning, you saw a lot of bundling, everything under one house, content templating, users. Then the plugins started rolling out, and those plugins were, WordPress native plugins. So you had like Mail Poet or whatever, and that whole cool team for newsletters, Gravity Forms for forms. But over time, we've seen a lot of those individual things just become, billion-dollar businesses or whatever, with like MailChimp, Typeform. MailChimp was sold recently. I think Typeform was sold to Adobe 6-7 years ago, whatever. But in all those categories, you have, so many tools now. So I think MarTech as a whole is going through this whole unbundling, where the key is, how well do you play nice with the other tools, and how well do you specialize and do well at your own tool. And so that's not the, you limited the scope for me in when you asked the question, but I just went outside that scope because I think it's an important influencer in terms of what will happen within WordPress. So to me, WordPress is going through, a large unbundling where, instead of having WordPress native solutions, you may have a plugin that integrates to a SaaS platform it's its own business. And you might have a lot of those kind of setups. At the same time, you might also start unbundling, certain parts of the experience. You might have a separate mobile app. You might have different apps for digital signage or email or whatever that may be. A lot of that stuff just ran out of WordPress 10 years ago. And nowadays, that is just happening in very different places. So for the next year, I don't expect much. I think, Matt's, just given his state of the word. I think the roadmap pieces are, phase 3 for Gutenberg or the block editor. So we're talking about the whole collaborative kind of multiplayer setup. In a more distant future, you're talking about native multilingual inside of WordPress and, all these kind of cool things. But what he's speaking to otherwise, which I think is quite interesting, is, block themes, patterns, and it's essentially almost like this, nobody wants to say it, I think, but, I think at some point there'll be an unbundling of content from presentation. So it's almost like breaking WordPress into two, where the content you have becomes part of a very good content repository tool. And, if you look at where content repositories have come from, they've come from document asset management, so DAM systems, right? Which were the little folder icons and everything, really, really gross stuff, right? There was DAM V1, which was exactly that. There's DAM V2, which was like, the last couple of years. Now we have DAM V3, in terms of like the kind of like block centric kind of content that's around. But none of that is all too exciting to me, I think, because I think there's still room for almost like a DAM V4, or like a new kind of content approach, or content management approach, content repository, whatever like you want to call it, where you're really just almost building content up like you would a style book, like Storybook on React or something like that, where you're building up content from like the atomic level into its elements, into compound objects, with different responsiveness or different looks for different experiences or whatever, or channels, and then some of that, or a lot of that, is packaged in such a way that it makes sense to marketers and content creators and people who are running campaigns or are just trying to run across multiple platforms. So I think that separation is almost like I think that's inevitable anyway at the SME plus level. But if it becomes smooth enough from a content, like from an user experience perspective, to actually live at that much lower level for like, smaller users, obviously not individual users, I think that still has to come as one. And a solution like this, you could imagine, maybe runs invisibly for users like that because they're just on the page editor and that's all they do. Or like you have that option to extend and to look behind the hood, or look behind the curtains, look under the hood, look behind the curtains, and really start dissecting your content in a way that makes sense for your organization. So I think like that's the greatest kind of unbundling opportunity that may present itself, and I think we need to build one that is open source, and becomes a de facto standard. Because I think from a design, or let's take a step back, you look at customer data platforms like CDPs, they're becoming extremely popular now. So something like Salesforce or HubSpot, you may have those solutions, but you may actually store your customer data in a separate CDP like Segment or mParticle or RudderStack. And that's then your single source of truth for all customer data across all your different platforms, because first-party data is becoming so important. What is that same single source of truth for your content globally across your entire organization? And like that is the thing I think is very interesting. And maybe there's challenges around that because design is more complicated than a first name, last name. But even then, I think, you can look at like, Figma or Sketch, where they're using like these auto layout tools, which all basically work off of Flexbox. And that is like, you have standards evolving to a certain extent, in terms of what the visuals can look like. So I think that's probably like the greatest opportunity, but that's not 1 year away. I think that's, a couple of years away. So I think in the meantime, the onboarding and user experience of WordPress itself is, still paramount, like being able to bring people into the block editor and making them feel empowered. But at the same time, everything we talked about before being that product marketing outside of like the software itself. The software is good. Like we don't need to change that much there, I think. I think a lot of that's come a long way. So if anything, become better at what we are known for, which is content. And then, start playing extremely nice with the rest of the ecosystem so that people can create those composable DXPs, or those best of breed stacks.
This is very interesting take. And when I'm listening to this, I have a feeling that, again, you are talking from the enterprise perspective. Because,
yeah, I am.
This content that there is this content repository and there is the presentation layer, the use case is the huge organization with tons of content, different markets, and
how big?
And a huge challenge.
How big of a company? What's your minimum standard? Mm-hmm. What's your guess? How big does a company need to be in revenue or people?
I guess this not comes from this perspective, but rather the market.
Okay.
Yeah, because this dictates. I mean, either market, so many markets operating, many languages, translation, and management of this. or product perspective, or so the offer. So what is the amount of content the company provides? So I guess there have to be like that's a hard guess. I wouldn't like to shoot from the hip, but there has to. I mean, like from thinking about this, there has to be a content team in order for the organization probably to justify the or be able to generate this amount of content that would cause troubles managing it. So I'm very vague, but intentionally.
I find it very interesting because we look at like a lot of small companies who are smaller, let's say like SME, like plus like at the 50 million plus level, even like have a CRM team. And that just runs the CRM all day long. And obviously like that's very important because CRMs are your revenue generating tool. So I completely respect that. So you could argue that, potentially, CDP to CRM is much more important than content repository or global content management is to web presentation, mobile presentation and all that. But I'd say in terms of like just a user base, whatever segment has in terms of users, whatever Sanity has in terms of users, automatically already fall into that scope. I still think this needs to happen, and my take is that, like I said before, I think it will be made invisible for smaller users. Like it's almost like saying, hey, build your content, inside the page editor like you do now. But if you want to really like go to the next step, like open advanced or something like that. And, you could almost imagine like two software pieces being bundled together to look like one. And I think that's where, something like WordPress could be successful. But the reason I bring it up is because I think other companies will try to make a play for this, and then we'll try to sort of hijack a lot of open source CMS's business by becoming that underlying content tool, and then building natural connectors or integrations for content across the board. So something that says, hey, we're free for small sites, come try us out, all that kind of stuff, kind of like Segment is now. We use Segment, like we're a small business, but we use Segment because as soon as you have like 5-6 tools, you're like, this makes sense. But I think that will be a place where a proprietary content management tool will try to make a play for a lot of your user base in terms of going after like that, 40% of the web that is WordPress or whatever, where some company will say, hey, let's go after that whole content repository piece for SME plus or whatever. And I think that can be very disruptive to WordPress because obviously that not only minimizes its footprint, but then may potentially also take away some of its open source dominance. And that's something that I don't think should happen. I think we should work very hard in Martech as a community. We should work very hard towards promoting open source CDPs, so single source of truth for customers, and then open source, whatever you call this content tool in the future, your single source of truth for content. I think if you have those two as open source solutions that where a company or an enterprise or whatever is in full control of their content and their customers, then it doesn't matter what they integrate with in the future, because you can take pieces away, you can put things in, but then you're always in control of your content and customers. And I think that's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And I'm also thinking about this unbundling because this plays nicely or not nicely, but I'm observing this with those no-code or low-code tools. Yesterday I saw, obviously ChatGPT is a huge thing. The enthusiasm a little bit faded. It peaked. But for example, yesterday I saw a video where there was a platform that, a guy basically generated 100 pages for SEO, like easy SEO pages for a massive website based on Airtable Webflow inputs, integrated this with ChatGDP via.
It's pretty hilarious. I like it.
Yeah. So basically, you put the names of the restaurants. You asked for the prompt for the SEO for ChatGDP. You integrate this with the guy's software that was fourth tool and with Zapier. So it was very easy to populate the content, and it was done via a couple of existing platforms. And what's amazing is the composability we have right now. So it's Web3 has this promise of composability, being trustless and so on, permissionless. Here you can have part of it with with the MarTech stack that's out there and all of the APIs, integrations, and you can leverage immensely, what you can achieve. And I'm not saying building quickly, but building stuff that wouldn't be able to be built in a reasonable time otherwise. So this is amazing, and I'm referring to this because I see, for example, what you are saying about unbundling WordPress that could be, or can be, or will be possible with those tools. Taking a piece of WordPress process, build process or functionality, encapsulating this and selling as a either plugin or a piece of software, or taking into WordPress something that had to be built from scratch otherwise. So this is very interesting what you are saying. Also from the perspective of bigger, not huge, but bigger organization as you mentioned.
Fair.
Yeah, this is
I'm with you. Like the way I look at it is like, and I think I'm saying this is the third time. Like the software is good, it works, it's great. Like it's really really good, and all the other software that's out there is amazing too. And in many ways, we're only limited by our imagination in a lot of these kind of marketing growth efforts nowadays. If you're a really smart person and you just constantly try to think outside the box with how you're going to do something, you're invariably going to start playing with, stuff like GPT-3 and Zapier and some other kind of automation and throw it all together to create absolutely hilarious stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's very unlimited, limitless, whatever you want to call it in terms of vision, So, I rarely see people taking WordPress to its absolute extreme, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
Breaking it or something like that. Like that's the feature functionality stuff is all very good for a CMS. I'm very impressed by all. Sure, can we improve Gutenberg or block editor in its current state? Yes, absolutely. But is it like a very impressive piece of work that is open source and has already acquired a lot of users? Yeah, like it's very very impressive. But what you do with it is ultimately up to you, and I think that comes back to my comment also about, what do we expect from the foundation or someone like Matt, like it's not, like he's done a lot. The foundation has done a lot. The contributors across the entire globe have done a ton for WordPress already. But there's a lot, I think, that's rests on our shoulders to take that, that code and then bring it outside the WordPress bubble in ways that are meaningful and exciting in other contexts, like the one you just described. That was like, poof, like really good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have still one more question.
Yeah, please.
What I was observing recently, in Poland, like recent 5 years, this was booming software development sector. It still is, but
Yes.
there is a ton of organizations, companies, dev shops that are between 20 to 1,000 people, organizations, and so many new started. And then why would you need in a country hundreds of software companies? And then the process of consolidation started. for those Ruby on Rails shops, Python shops, and so on. So my question is, do you think it will happen also for WordPress agencies, like consolidation of WordPress agencies, or it's, your take is not gonna happen. It's not needed. There are no forces that would, need to do this, be bigger instead of many small agencies.
I think we've already seen a lot of consolidation in the agency space, in the WordPress space. Like a lot of products have been acquired. Like on the product side, like if you look at like Syed and stuff, like acquired tons of plugins and sold them.
But this is product. Yeah.
On the agency, same thing. Agency,
okay.
You've seen the same thing. Yeah, you've seen a lot of like we've acquired one agency at least in our time. I think it's just a very natural course, and even if you look at you're giving Poland as an example. I think 20 years ago, Poland was kind of emerging as a shared services business, for a lot of like big European corporate companies, and that went through a sort of consolidation too, because they didn't just all start off as shared services, right? Like Citigroup had its HR in Warsaw, or its payroll in Warsaw. Unilever might have had like their accounting out there, and at some point they decided, hey, let's consolidate everything.
Yeah, there's like a ton of
I think that's just like that's just the maturity of an industry, right? Like it's something starts off, and then you naturally try to become more efficient as like the honeymoon phase has kind of gone and the hype has died down, and like the music, I don't want to say has stopped, but like it's a much harder business, and you can't just expect to get business for free anymore. And that's
where this cycle.
Yeah,
cycle
exactly. yeah. Let's bring up the word cycle. Yeah, I mean, cycle is like a great place for these things to happen. Even like when I travel, like for me when COVID started happening, like that was my kind of green light to go travel more, because to me, like that just means that everything's a lot cheaper in certain countries, and because tourism down, so hotel prices are down, and all the flights are down, all that kind of stuff. And traveling around, you just see like a massive shift, especially in hospitality, where and I'm making this up, but like 50% of the restaurants that you're used to seeing are just closed down, and all of a sudden there's 50% new restaurants that have opened up. And digital companies are not immune to like things like the pandemic either, because companies they may have clients that are in sectors that are heavily affected by this, or now with just the larger kind of global economics issues, these companies might also be affected with that, and we're seeing like layoffs across the board. But yeah, I mean, this is the natural thing that happens. I think where you either have a consolidation, a shaking out of players, just lots of change. Like I think that's the only guaranteed thing when the market is doing this, that some people just kind of fall off at the top or the bottom.
Of course,
and, just get shaken out. So yeah,
from there they will.
So if they go broke, they need to be acquired, or go bankrupt. So, there's a lot of, I think, deal hunting and things like that for people that are, still cash flow positive and, very, and carry a high conviction in terms of that space going forward.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much for your take on this. And also, thank you very much for the conversation. I loved it. And
more than welcome. Me too.
Yeah. Thank you then, and see you next time. And
sounds good. I'm looking forward to the next time.
Exactly. Next, yeah. We can do a summary of 2023 next time, for example.
Yes, let's see what things I said happened or didn't happen, and then
all right,
we can beat the shit out of the bad ideas.
Done deal then. Okay. We can set up the date and time.
1 year from now.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Noel.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
If you like what you've just heard, don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. On the other hand, if you've got a question we haven't answered yet, feel free to reach out to us directly. Just go to osomstudio.com/contact. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next episode of the Awesome to Know podcast.